Hello everyone, Will Snyder here with WediaBuzz.com. We've been covering an ongoing topic, HR compliance in medical marijuana patients. And one of the attorneys who spoke at the HR compliance conference we recently attended is Gregory from Sherman and Howard, a prestigious law firm located in downtown Phoenix. Mr. Falls was kind enough to join us here to continue the conversation a little further, and I'd like to jump right into it. Mr. Falls, thank you for joining us. Just to recap, you were one of the featured speakers at the recent Society for Human Resource Management conference. What is your connection with SHRM?
Yeah, I mean, the firm and some of the labor and employment lawyers are very active in SHRM, speak at many of the conferences. We sponsor many SHRM events throughout the year. So we are an active participant in that organization. I personally have not been a member or actively involved just because the nature of my practice doesn't call for me, to be there. I was asked to speak, I believe, because of my familiarity with the law and how the dispensary process works, how the medical marijuana process works, on the ground, in the streets, if you will.
We've been learning about how human resource professionals can best handle compliance issues related to medical marijuana patients. What is your firm's experience with medical marijuana related issues?
Yeah, I mean, we were one of the firms that upon the adoption of the Arizona Medical Marijuana Act was concerned about the ethical ramifications of representing people in the business. So we elected not to do that from the beginning. And there were a number of conflicting or not very well worded ethical opinions out there on whether you could or could not represent somebody who knowingly was violating federal law. So what we have done is we have for some time represented the Arizona Department of Health Services, which is the regulatory agency, in litigation matters arising out of the act. We also then have represented, we have a fairly robust labor and employment practice, so we have clients all the time who are asking for advice on, what do I do when somebody tested positive, can I test them, things like that. And so we also have, as part of that practice, given advice to employers on issues, not just dealing with medical marijuana, but across the board on labor and employment issues.
Employers generally lean on the premise that marijuana use is still a violation of federal law. And for those companies who maintain zero tolerance and drug-free workplace policies, should they be concerned enforcing these policies?
Well, I think so. It's a very complicated area, but my rule of thumb would be initially look at things as if you are dealing with a prescription medicine that the patient is being asked by a physician to take. If you would treat prescription medicine one way and you treat medical marijuana one way, from an employee complaint point of view, I think that's the safe thing to do. The difficulty is there are the overlying federal concerns that some employers have federal contracts, they have security clearances, they have issues where really their employees cannot be taking a substance that is illegal under federal law. And for those employers, really comply with your obligation under federal law, because not to do so may endanger, not just your relationship with the employee, but your relationship with whatever it is that you are doing that is covered by federal law.
Because medical marijuana is legally used to treat some forms of disability, what is your opinion? Should the ADA lean towards patient protection?
Well, that's a political policy question that I think depends on really the will of the American people. Right now, if you are dealing with a federal law, a federal program, anything that's federal, you need to deal with the fact that marijuana is a Schedule I controlled substance. And I would tell somebody, you can't ignore federal law when you're dealing with a federal program. On the other hand, if you get to a state program, then that is where you look at, the state law, and maybe that is where state law controls.
Medical marijuana is such a fast-moving topic, and it seems to be on everyone's radar for one reason or another. Where do you see things going here in Arizona?
Yeah, well, there is at least one group that is, they've, I believe, filed to legalize recreational marijuana, which in Arizona as a state would make us similar to what they're doing in Colorado and Washington. Whether the voters are going to approve that or not, I think is still up in the air. Obviously, it needs to be signed by the appropriate number of people, and then people need to look at it and say, is this really, if we're going to do it, is this how we want to do it? I don't know whether that's going to happen. On a federal level, there is some movement the easiest thing would be to move marijuana from Schedule I to Schedule II, which would have certain implications and allow people to do things. It would still be illegal, but it could be used for certain things. I personally don't think that's going to happen during the presidential election cycle. What happens after the presidential election cycle, I think, depends on, what parties and what people we have in office at that time.
With the momentum seemingly moving towards most states adopting some sort of legal medical marijuana legislation and perhaps prohibition ending altogether, can this bell be unrung at either the state or federal level?
Federally, there are a lot of things they can do. So changing course is not as hard at the federal level. At the state level, we have, I think it was Proposition 108 was the proposition, it's the Voter Protection Act. What happened was we passed medical marijuana in Arizona back in the 90s. I think it was 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. Anyway, we passed it. The legislature promptly said no and revoked that law, if you will, and so the legalization of marijuana went away. Because of that, we amended the Constitution to say that if a law is approved by the voters, that law cannot go away except by a subsequent voter, vote by the voters, not by the legislature. And even further, which is sometimes a problem in medical marijuana area, the law cannot even be amended unless 3/4 of the legislature agrees, which almost never happens, and unless that amendment is in furtherance of the intent of the proposition itself. So we have some things in the medical marijuana program that people have learned are either just ambiguous or they really could be done in a better way, and we're kind of stuck with them unless someone wants to go back to the voters and ask them to change the law.
The conference Sherman organized was well attended. In fact, I was told that there were nearly twice as many people in attendance than normal. Clearly, this is a topic of interest to a lot of people. What was your takeaway from that conference?
Yeah, well, I think the takeaway is, we would, with the exception of lawyers, the rest of the world would love simple answers where you can do a 5-step checklist, check off 1 through 5, and you're good to go. The takeaway is, in an area like this that is moving so rapidly, what you can do today that's okay may not be something that you can do tomorrow, or vice versa. Something that is not authorized or not recommended today may, just by virtue of change in policy, be different tomorrow. Let me give you an example. A few years back, the Justice Department recommendation to the U.S. attorneys was go after these medical marijuana people. They're violating federal law. Most recently, that policy has changed, and now it is, as long as the states have a program, it's well regulated, and we're not putting marijuana in the hands of minors, then leave the program alone. The law didn't change, it was just a law enforcement priority change. And again, whether the on the ground law enforcement people are complying with that, I don't know. I'm sure people have different opinions on that.
Mr. Falls, thank you for taking the time to meet with us. I know you're very, very busy, and I appreciate your time.
I just want to make it clear for the record here that I did identify some of the people that we represent. I don't speak for them except when I'm standing in court. When I'm sitting here like this or speaking in conversation, I'm really speaking for myself, and the opinions are mine and should not be attributed to anyone else. And I want to thank you for the time today.
We're going to stay in touch with Mr. Falls and keep our ear to the ground for any new or developing information on this subject. We're also working on several other topical series at WeediaBuzz.com, including a very interesting look into real-world patients, how medical marijuana has helped in treatment, and we're going to profile how several dispensaries across Arizona are giving back to their communities. If you have a story to tell or would like to get in touch with us for any reason, go to WeediaBuzz.com. Let us know what's on your mind. And thank you for joining us, and until next time.